Here we are again, that GD show. Welcome, everyone. We were having technical things right up till the hour. Isn't it fun to do live stuff, Genevieve?
So much fun. You know, a little better than last week, though. At least I think we're on the right
stream.
The right
Yep.
stream, yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. Hello, Dr. Marlene Winell.
Hello, hello. Good to be here.
So honored to have you tonight. I can't wait for this conversation. And yeah, I'm just really pumped about that. My knowledge of you goes way back, and we actually haven't connected. We've kind of known each other, but not really talked before today, right?
Yeah, to any extent, no, we haven't.
Yeah, so I'm really glad to have you. Genevieve, you and I were in California last week doing this show. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, I know. It's so crazy. I've been spoiled being able to see you in person so many times in the last month.
Yeah, Marlene, Genevieve, and I have been doing this show since September. We never met in person until February of this year, and then we got to see each other again in California last week. So we did the show at some person's house that we'd never met before. We were staying, where Bevan and I were staying, and Genevieve was in town and work. So we did the show together. So it was fun.
Good. I bet it was finally meet.
Yes. I just love her so much. And she's special young lady.
No.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We've got an incredible show tonight on religious trauma. And I know many of you have been affected by that in your lives, probably still are to some degree. I know it's one of those things that just, it doesn't get fixed overnight. And Dr. Marlene Winell is going to talk about this at great length and share her experience, her vast knowledge and experience. But hopefully, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, like it. And if you would be so inclined, you could become a Patreon supporter. The link to that is in the show notes and will be in the chat as well. You can find it at daveoutloud.org. And speaking of that, Bevan and I made a video today for kind of a behind the scenes thing. So if you want to get a peek at behind the scenes of what my life is like, there's Greg Markowski every week, 1999. You are such a faithful supporter. Thank you, Greg. We appreciate that so much. And but yeah, Patreon support. We make these private videos every now and then for any amount that you want to. We don't have tiers in our Patreon, so any support, if you appreciate what we do and you want to support that, then that's a way to do it. Another way to do it is like Greg just did in these super chats. We appreciate that so much. And everybody's support just means so much to us. And we do want to hear from you tonight. Genevieve, how can folks reach us tonight?
You can always just give us a call. That number is 217-375-9933. We've got lines open and amazing call screeners on the other end. So
yes. And you can also ask questions in the chat. We'll try to pay attention to those as much as we can. But as we delve into this subject tonight, I think you're going to want to. You're going to have some questions for Marlene, and you may want to talk to her directly. So this is your chance to do that. So Marlene, without further ado, I don't even know where to start with you. I feel I'm a little bit giddy tonight having you on. I got to tell you, I just feel like I'm calling you. I've got my own private term for you. You're the godmother of religious trauma syndrome. You've done a lot of research on this, but I think I want to start with your own experience, your own story. You grew up the daughter of missionaries, correct?
Yep, in Taiwan.
In Taiwan. Okay. So tell us what that was like. What brand were you, if you will, of Christian?
Well, my parents were with the Assemblies of God Church.
Oh, geez, I know them well.
Do you? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Pentecostal.
Yeah.
And I was in Taiwan for most of my growing up until age 16, but then we visited the States a couple of times. So I was familiar with the Assemblies of God churches here as well. And the big emphasis they put on the Pentecostal side. So
Yeah.
that was part of it. And then in Taiwan, I went to a boarding school from 7th grade through 10th grade. And then we moved to Southern California, which was a big culture shock. And I got involved in the Jesus movement there.
I know that well.
Bit of a Jesus freak. And
yeah.
Expecting Jesus to come back any day. So that was the latter part of my high school years and first part of college. And then
what years would those be?
Graduated high school in 1970.
Okay, so you're a few years ahead of me. I graduated in 73.
Yeah.
And I talk about that a lot in the early part of my book, which I'm going to send you a copy, by the way.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read an excerpt tonight because it relates to you and my learning of you. But yeah, the Jesus movement, Jesus was coming back any day. Yeah.
We had Christian communes and Christian rock and roll was taking off. We were witnessing to people at the beach, having beach baptisms. It was all, and we were all going to church in our long dresses and hippie clothes and bare feet, and thought that it was all very cool as well.
Yeah, the younger folks don't know what that Jesus movement, the Jesus freak movement, it was basically an extension of the hippie movement, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the hippie movement with Jesus thrown in.
Yeah, it was a lot of the same things, except that we were high on Jesus.
Exactly. Get high on God instead of drugs.
And we had our own rock and roll.
Yeah. 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 We very much paralleled that. I remember going out to California in probably 1974, going to Calvary Chapel, going to see Larry Norman and Keith Green, and all of that was just Jesus rock and roll, man. It was heady stuff.
Did you hear Chuck Smith?
What? Yeah. Yeah.
Chuck Smith, yeah. He was
Chuck Smith, Calvary Chapel. Did you go there?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, I knew Chuck.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh man. Is he still going? Is he still alive?
I don't know. Actually, I have no idea.
He can't be. He was old back then.
Yeah.
So you got involved in the Jesus movement as a teenager in California in the Assemblies of God, speaking in tongues, prophetic words. That was a brand of Christianity that my whole experience was charismatic evangelical. So not really a part of any denomination like Assemblies of God, but I was in plenty of those churches off and on. So people, it's a very personal experience. God, God is answering prayer. God is speaking to you. God is leading you. That was your experience up until what age?
Well, I broke away gradually from about age 18 to 20 while I was in college. But my zealotry, I was going to say my fanaticism was started earlier than that. It started more at age 15 while I was still in Taiwan at that boarding school. But I was on the side going to a special group that met on Wednesday nights and was Pentecostal, and I got totally into that and speaking in tongues. And I went to a high school reunion a number of years ago, and everybody remembers me as just this very good, pious person. Even though I was athletic and I was a cheerleader and I was in all the sports, still I was the person who everybody considered close to God.
Right.
And I don't know if people could relate that well to me, but they admired it.
Well, they considered you kind of a freak, I guess, because you were different in that sense. Right?
Yeah, I was different. But it's really challenging. It's very challenging to be a religious person at that age because you also care so much about what other people think.
Yeah. Peer pressure and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you went to a boarding school. Was that a secular boarding school or was it a Christian school as
It was
well?
a Christian school. It was run by several mission boards. It was basically fundamentalist, evangelical, but not charismatic. So that's why I had to take my tongue speaking off campus.
Wow.
Oh, so you were a bit of a rebel in that sense.
Yeah. I got called before the school board at one point and told not to propagate, not to propagate my views about that.
Yeah, I was scolded by a Baptist pastor in those days for speaking in tongues. I was trying to, that's what's so interesting. There's all these different levels of Christianity, and we believed that if you didn't have the gifts of the Spirit, you weren't like a full gospel kind of Christian. You were just kind of halfway there.
Right.
Yeah. And my God, the arrogance of that, right?
Gospel. Yeah.
So can you still speak in tongues? I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. So you're a psychologist. So I've got to ask you this. What do you think that is? Because it's not the Holy Spirit, because neither you nor I have the Holy Spirit in us, as we've learned, but we can still do glossolalia. So what is that?
Well, I think other people can too. It's a matter of relaxing and relaxing your face, your tongue and lips, and basically saying gibberish.
Yeah. So it's learned behavior in your mind, right? It's something we learn to do by imitating people around us.
And in fact, in services where they're trying to get more people to speak in tongues, they sometimes will try to start you off,
coach you, yeah,
phrases, and they're all speaking tongues around you, and so there's this group effect.
Yeah, and a peer pressure, and I remember when I was praying to receive the baptism of the Holy Spirit, it's what it's called, for those uninformed folks. And I was imitating the things I'd heard around us, around me, and people were coaching me, Coca-Cola, things like that to loosen the tongue. Shandala. Oh, we are kindred spirits, Marlene. That's so funny.
Shandala. Say, if anybody that wants to can say that 20 times, and you'll be speaking in tongues before long.
And you'll be doing a heavenly language. So you, by the way, folks, we have lines open. I see some in the chat that probably should be calling in. So call in and talk to Marlene. So you kind of started drifting away as you got into your college years, correct?
Yeah. And I call the process a combination of pushes and pulls, because pushes were my disillusionment with the Bible. I was pretty intellectual. I read a lot, I studied, and I wanted my faith to be my own and not my parents'.
Right.
So I did a lot of study, and then when I went to college, I took a class on the Bible as literature, and that was pretty eye-opening.
Oh, that'll lead you down a dark path, right?
Yeah, and the more you learn about the Bible, not reading the Bible itself, but the more you learn about what's in the Bible and how the different books came to be, the less you believe that it's the Word of God dictated.
Right. People. But up until then, you'd been told it was inspired by God. You were an inerrantist, most likely. Yeah.
And Christians are really, really good at making excuses for the contradictions. So if you want to believe it, you can, just keep going with the program and don't question anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I questioned things, and then I started taking courses in a lot of different subjects, things like anthropology, literature, history, all these things that you take in the first couple of years of college. To me, college was like a candy store, finding out about so many different subjects. And those are a lot of those that I just mentioned really challenge your standard beliefs. You can't study biology, for example, without running into evolution, or history or archaeology without running into knowledge about the history of the earth and people. So it was all really challenging. And so I lost my blind faith in the church leaders. And I also kind of lost faith in the church because at the time it was still very patriarchal.
Oh, yeah.
The men at Calvary Chapel were definitely the rulers. And I, at one point, had started a hotline. It was a 24-hour hotline. It was a project for school in the first place. I started this hotline, and we had a lot of volunteers. This was in Southern California, Newport Beach, and we got a building, and we were going great guns. It was one of these subtle programs where we pretended that we were interested in people's problems, that would call, but then the answer was always Jesus.
Yeah.
But anyway, Chuck Smith and Calvary Chapel wouldn't, even though I had pulled it all together myself along with another woman, we were not allowed to be the directors because we had the wrong genitalia. So
that's unfortunate for you, isn't it?
Yeah. So the church, because they had paid our first month's rent, Chuck said he would pay the first month's rent, and then after that, it would have to be the Lord's doing. Fine, that was fine with us. But he picked a man in the church to come and direct our program that didn't know anything about it, and he had only been
Genevieve doesn't know what to do with that.
I wish I were surprised, but it's still just disgusting.
Too. So that was really outrageous, and that struck me.
But did you at that time, Marlene, think this is wrong, or were you just going along because that's what you'd been taught?
Oh, at that point, that I think in the breaking away process, there are all these little chinks in the armor, and that was a big chink. This just felt so wrong, and he didn't know what he was doing. And so that was just one very big thing. And then the sermons and all the attitudes at church were still so patriarchal. And I was becoming more conscious of feminism at school, And so my raised consciousness was contradicting my indoctrinated faith. So there was that.
Now, what did you go to college to study to begin with? What were you going to pursue?
Well, my first major was physics, but I gave up on that before long. And I studied social ecology.
Okay.
Ecology is a program at University of California at Irvine. But then the other side of the coin was the pulls. I started becoming attracted to things in the world, and I don't mean sinning. This is an assumption that a lot of people make, a lot of Christians, that if you leave, it's because you want to sin. My sister-in-law said that at dinner one time, and I was just flabbergasted. Because what I was attracted to was just the breadth of knowledge and experience in the world that was available. And then I was meeting people mostly in the college environment that had all different kinds of frameworks for life, different belief systems. And I met a couple that were following a Maharishi, and they were devoted to their faith, and they claimed all the same things, healings and miracles and peace in their marriage and all the things that we claimed. And that really shook me up, and I thought, wow, they had more fruits of the Spirit, and I was more interested in fruits of the Spirit, frankly. All the miracles and all were
love, joy, peace, long suffering. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, but growing up in the Assemblies of God, I'm very familiar with that frame of mind. They're not very intellectual. They're very experience-oriented. So I'm assuming your parents were in that mindset as well. So how did they feel about you pursuing this education, which some in that line of thinking can see as the devil's work? It's gonna, you don't need to be getting all educated. You need the Holy Spirit. So how did that go? Were they opposed to that, or?
My parents were college educated, and they did, in our family, they did put a value on education.
Good.
So that might have been their big mistake, as far as
apparently
encouraging me to learn.
But they had to know that you were going to learn things in college that were contradictory to the biblical narrative, right?
I don't know. I mean, I have 4 siblings, and they're all still Christians.
Really?
Yeah, I'm just
You're the black sheep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Do you think, okay, again, psychological question. Do you think some of us are just born more curious and born to push against the edges a little bit more?
Sure, I think we're different temperamentally from birth, and some babies are more curious than others. Just sense of temperament.
Because I mean, I've seen that over and over again, where multiple siblings raised in the same environment and have the similar experiences, and one deconstructs from faith and the others don't.
Mm-hmm.
I know over and over people of that experience. So I'm left to wonder, are there just some of us that are more inquisitive about, because I remember through my journey as a Christian, and I spent 3.5 decades in the evangelical world, I didn't question it nearly as early as you did, to my detriment. But as I was writing my book, I was remembering all these things and reliving all these things. And I remember at many stages along the way, having questions and doubts and pushing against the edges of what my experience and what the dogma would dictate, what my theology would. So I was always in conflict with myself.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to get free.
Well, I remember being in conflict with myself too. And I have these old diaries that I've read, diaries that I wrote when I was a teenager and when I was a Jesus freak. And these diaries show that I was trying so hard. I was trying to be this perfect little Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept failing. You know, I'd have an argument with my sister, or I'd have a sexual fantasy or something. And then, so there's all this repentance in my diaries and all this striving and Jesus, forgive me and let me be like you. And I was always blaming myself. I was always the weak and bad one.
Yeah.
Then I'd wake up and try again. And this just went on and on. And it's really kind of sad to read because it was a bit torturous. And then when I would read the Bible and study all these things, you know, at my younger age, I would do what everybody else did, which is twist it all around to make it fit so that I could continue my relationship with Jesus, which actually was a personally important relationship for me. And I've even called Jesus my first lover because I was so into it. You know, I would spend hours on my knees praying. And, you know, when you speak in tongues or sing in tongues, you create an altered state.
Oh, yeah.
It really is like a drug state. And I was into it. So I had to make all these things fit. It's just sad to read these writings about how much blame I heaped on myself for not being perfect.
Oh, yeah. And the cycle of guilt and shame and repentance. And mine was always masturbating. I would always just end up masturbating. And then I would feel guilty and full of shame. And, you know, it's just a very normal, natural thing that teenage boys do.
Yeah.
And yet I was just so guilty about it. And it was just sad that's a mindset that we have to endure.
Yeah. It seems like in a lot of not just very fundamentalist sects of Christianity, but just in Christianity in general, you sort of hold these contradictory ideas that you should be perfect, that you're supposed to be perfect, but then at the same time, nobody is perfect but Jesus, and everybody is a horrible, dreadful sinner deserving of hell, regardless of how perfect you are. And I have to imagine, you know, how that must feel to hold both of those things to be true at the same time, and what that would do to somebody's self-esteem, especially at that age around 15 and 16, when, you know, your hormones are kind of telling you to hate yourself anyway.
Well, like Dave said, it's a cycle, and it's a little bit like domestic violence.
Yeah.
Where there's a conflict, there's violence, and then typically the man will blame the woman for provoking it. So she's sorry.
Yeah.
She's sorry for causing it.
Yeah.
He's the one that actually did the violence. So then he gets really nice and it treats her really well for a while, and she realizes that she can be a good wife and everything's going to be okay. And then it happens again. So there's this cycle that keeps going around. But part of it is admitting that you're wrong, getting forgiven, and then you get this wash of forgiveness and love. And in the Christian context, of course, this is all imaginary in your prayer life, but other people are present sometimes too. If you're up at the front of the church, up at the altar, having one of your confession scenes,
rededication,
rededicating your life, rededicating your life, and then there is this high.
Oh yeah,
do that. You're temporarily just on top of the world. You finally allowed Jesus to come really deep into your heart, and it's going to work this time.
Right.
Then after a while, you sin again.
Yeah.
So basically, what you have to do is be eternally grateful. You're just constantly grateful for how God can love you, being the scum that you are.
Mm-hmm. God, horrible messaging. And so I want to get to the heart and the meat of the conversation tonight. We do have a call coming in that I'll get to in a minute. But so you get your degree. Your undergrad was in what, finally? What'd you settle on?
In social ecology.
Okay, and then you got your doctorate in
human development and family studies.
And so you started a psychology practice at that point?
After that point, well, I took the psychology graduate courses to get licensed as a psychologist, and then I started my practice. Yeah.
So at what point did you begin to focus on religious trauma, or when did that become something that, did you always have an interest in that, or was that something that came down the road?
It came a little bit down the road, actually, maybe about 5 or 6 years into my practice. And it originally started as a self-reflection. I had left the faith by then, and sat at my typewriter. We had typewriters in those days. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a machine that has letters of the alphabet. Anyway, I sat down and I was typing what I thought were the consequences of being raised fundamentalist, and the name of it was something like that. And they just started listing, like low self-esteem, trouble in relationships, trouble with sex, and I just started listing all these things and thinking about Bible verses and arguments in the Christian world that would create all these, and it ended up being a paper that I shared with a minister, and then this bunch of ministers had this meeting. They all wanted to read it because they were concerned about it. I ended up giving a talk at the Unitarian Church about it, and then I rewrote it a little bit and presented it at the American Psychological Association in New York, and people were very interested in it. I had no idea. I honestly had no idea that my personal experience was shared by a lot of other people who could relate to what I was listing as symptoms and consequences of being raised that way. So then that evolved. And after a while, I decided that it could be a book and started contacting publishers, and found these publishers that were very excited to do it. They were two men that had been raised Catholic, and they knew that there was nothing on the market in terms of self-help. This was going to be a self-help book for how to recover. And so that's how
Leaving the Fold is the name of that book, right?
Yeah.
And when was that written, published?
1994.
Wow, you were way ahead of the curve. I mean, and I'm just so impressed with that, Marlene, because it's easy to talk about this stuff now that everyone's talking about it. It's kind of the hip thing, deconstruction and deconverting and religious trauma, not hip, but it's such a normal part of our conversation now.
Yeah.
But back then it wasn't. And you were kind of pioneering all of this conversation in a sense.
Yeah, there really wasn't I wasn't really joining a group of people that were having a conversation. I was pretty much working out all of my own spiritual growth, and it took me actually 4 years to write it.
Yeah.
It took a long time. And in the meantime, I had a baby and moved to Australia, so there were some interruptions.
Oh, that's yeah. Those kids will interrupt everything, won't they?
Yeah. There were times when I thought I couldn't do it, and I'd put it aside, and I'd have to talk to the publishers, and they gave me an editor that was hugely helpful. So I finally got through it.
Well, it's an incredible work, and you were referencing your own trauma because you experienced trauma leaving your faith, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. The word trauma is defined all different ways, but
Yeah.
sure.
Well, how would you describe it? I mean, because it wasn't just oh, I don't believe anymore. It was something that you had to work through.
Well, it's kind of like a divorce or a breakup of a relationship, the most intimate of all.
Mm-hmm.
That you don't believe in God anymore, made me pretty nervous and guilty. Because here I am, I'm betraying my lover Jesus and
Mm-hmm.
leaving him. And Christians are always going on about how sad God is when people sin, and all of his feelings that you're supposed to care about. So there was that going on, and then the whole reconstruction process of figuring out, okay, then what is life about? What is going to be my meaning in life? And when I got married at age 20 before I deconverted.
Okay.
So, and we had a very Christian wedding.
Mm-hmm.
We had to like redefine all of that. So there were all these pieces that had to be reconstructed, basically.
Did he deconstruct alongside you?
Yeah, fortunately.
Good. Yeah. Well, that's and so at what age did you come to the conclusion you no longer believed in the God of the Bible you'd been raised with?
Well, that would have been around age 21, 22. Yeah, shortly after I got married.
Did you begin to identify as an atheist?
No, I think for a while I went the route of more of a liberal Christian, like Jesus was still a good guy.
Yeah.
But everybody else had messed it up. And,
Yeah.
And I didn't believe in organized religion, that was not
Yeah.
good. But I stopped going to church altogether. I couldn't stand it anymore.
Right.
I couldn't stand
How did your parents take that?
We had some arguments, but for the most part, they just stayed out of it. I wasn't living at home, so I didn't have their presence around me all the time. But when my book came out, I didn't keep anything a secret. I just was living my life, doing my thing. I also didn't make any big announcements about leaving the faith because I didn't even realize it when it was happening. It was one of these gradual things. I didn't realize that how I was going to end up would be so radically different. But when my book came out, my mother said, "Marlene, what did Jesus do to deserve this from you?"
Oh, my goodness. You were so mean to Jesus, Marlene.
Yeah.
What'd you answer her? How'd you answer that question?
I don't know. I think I was looking behind. Is he here? Is he here?
Oh, my God.
I was pretty flabbergasted by that.
Yeah. Let's take a call here. You okay with that? I think it's somebody you know.
Yeah.
Janice wants to talk to you, Marlene. Hello, Janice. Are you there?
Hi.
Hey.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. You're on with Genevieve and Dr. Marlene Winell, who you may know well.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I'm really enjoying the interview here. I can sure relate.
Well, tell us who you are, Janice, and what you've got on your mind.
Thanks, Dave. I'm calling from British Columbia, Canada, and I am the founder of the Conference on Religious Trauma. And we had our first conference online last year, and Dave, you were one of our speakers at that time, and Dr. Winell also was a speaker, a keynote speaker, and I'm so grateful that Dr. Winell is joining us again this year online. The Conference on Religious Trauma will be happening April 29th, so just about a month from now, April 29th to May 1st.
Yes, and we've put a link to that in the chat. So if anyone has questions about that or wants to, you're taking signups now, correct?
Yes, the tickets are selling quite briskly. I'm happy to say, and we have we're covering a lot of topics this year, including fear of hell, which can be such a big one for people, and coercive control, and just all sorts of different topics, some new ones that we didn't have last year. Another important one, navigating relationships when they become unequally yoked, when one person deconverts and the other doesn't, and that there can just be so much pain in those situations. So I thought it was important to have someone talk about that. And of course, this year we're also going to be looking at the church's role in perpetrating cultural genocide of Canada's First Nations people, and also Native American people and Indigenous people around the world. The church is very guilty.
You could say that again.
Yeah, I will. The church is guilty.
The church is very guilty. I was going to say the church is very guilty. Wonder, she, her. Thank you for your super chat, $20. Thank you. Really related to this conversation. A lot of our viewers come from the similar backgrounds as ours, and can really relate to this, the trauma of leaving their religion and the aftermath of that, leaving the fold, as it were.
Oh yeah.
So,
and Dave, I also wanted to let people know, because you had mentioned that if you would be masturbating as a teenager, then you would feel guilty and kind of get drawn back to that whole cycle. In October, we're having the first ever Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture conference. That's also going to be online. So folks like me and you and others who survived purity culture indoctrination might find that conference really interesting and empowering. And that'll be in October online. That
sounds great. You're probably going to get Daryl Ray to come on that, because he loves talking about sex.
Yes. Yeah. He definitely is, and we have some fantastic sex therapists and psychologists and social workers, people who are very interested in and work closely with those recovering from purity culture indoctrination. So that'll be a good one too. Yeah, where really the word about religious trauma, thanks to Dr. Winell, because she's really the pioneer in the field, people are finally starting to understand that religion can be very toxic and traumatizing for a great many people.
Yep. As I call her, she's the godmother of religious trauma.
We want to be godmother.
Or maybe the godmother of coping with religious trauma. You certainly have not caused any.
That's probably more appropriate. Thank you, Genevieve.
You're welcome.
She's not causing the trauma. She's fixing it.
We were talking about reasons for leaving, aspects of leaving, and sex was one for me too, and also just physical affection, to be able to hold and comfort and care for another human being, and the reality of that, and then bonding, of course, too, have that be so much more real and incredibly satisfying compared to my first relationship, which is being bonded to Jesus. That it was easy to let go of that once I had a real relationship. So I told my husband that he helped bring my faith down.
Oh, good. He helped you get free from that, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Janice, I appreciate you putting this conference on. I know your originally it was going to be in 2020, correct? In live before God sent a plague to us in the form of COVID.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so we had to 2 years and hold it online, but I'm glad we were able to do that, and I'm really grateful to both you and Marlene for believing in my dream for the conference and being willing to participate, because I know a lot of people were really moved and touched and empowered by the things that both of you had to say. So thanks so much for participating.
Well, it was my pleasure, and I do believe in what you're doing. I know Marlene is more of an she's legitimately got something to say. I'm just a dude who's got ALS and And I talk about dying and living, but that's about, that's about it. But Marlene has all this wisdom and knowledge to share. So,
Oh, don't sell yourself short, Dave.
Well, I just tell you, whatever.
That's right.
But no, it's great work that you guys are doing. It's important conversations, to be sure. And
thank you. Thanks a lot for taking my call.
You bet. And good luck with the conference. And I'll keep promoting it. And because we deal with a lot of people who are experiencing this stuff. I know, I've told others this, but I've seen directly people who have experienced PTSD from wartime experiences and religious trauma PTSD. And one friend in particular has told me that the religious trauma is worse than the PTSD from 3 tours in Afghanistan.
Wow.
That he wakes up in night sweats thinking about hell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how bad this is.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so we have to keep talking about it.
That's why I don't have any problem labeling religious practices as abusive.
No, it is. Yeah.
I called it terrorism because terrorism. I mean, and early on, people said, "Oh, you have so much courage talking about all this and describing." And I don't think I have a lot of courage. I think I'm just describing what I see. I mean, I had a practice, a psychology practice before I started this particular work, and I just would ask people about their religious history, which turns out to be a little bit unusual for therapists, because they tend to treat it as part of a person's culture, leave it alone, respect it, don't ask about that. But I did ask because, I had written this paper about my own experience, so I was just curious. And then I interviewed a lot of people, and it turned out that there were things that could legitimately be called mental and physical abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that even though as a culture we have responded very seriously to things like physical abuse, and Alice Miller has written a lot about that, and also sexual abuse. We've gotten serious about that and removing children from homes that are experiencing that, but very little attention to mental and physical, mental and emotional. And so if you think about it, what is that? Those are ideas that get implanted in small children's brains that that go very, very deep. And even though people grow up and leave their faith, some of these assumptions are still there. And I've concluded that fundamentalist religions, not just Christianity, but the fundamentalist version of a lot of religions,
they
teach 2 huge assumptions. One is you're not okay, and the other is you're not safe.
Right?
Yeah. And think about what those 2 things create in a child. And imagine, just growing up with the idea that you're not okay and you're never going to be okay either.
Mm-hmm.
And you're never going to be safe, because you can't know, even if you accept Jesus, you can't know whether it took. There are lots of people that got saved a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I got baptized 3 times.
Because you're not sure whether God heard your prayer or whether you've been sinning too much. You've lost your salvation. There's a lot of craziness where these ideas can do the driving you crazy, because you can't know anything for sure. So you're constantly afraid, and you're afraid of the sin in the world. There are angels and demons. There's this whole spiritual existence that's all around us doing all these things, including in the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's terrifying. Wow. It's terrifying. So I'll call it terrorism, because the definition of terrorism is using violence or threat of violence for control. Okay? Now, isn't that exactly a description? When you talk about threatening a child with hell, a child can imagine it. All you have to do is compare it to fire. Children can imagine it, and they can become totally terrified and stay that way for decades, like you were saying.
Yeah. And one of the super chats with Cultastic, thank you for that, by the way. He says, religious trauma equals being told Armageddon is coming every day. you grow up with those things in your head, the rapture. How many people have kids came home from school and the house was empty and they thought, oh my God, the rapture happened and I got left behind.
Yeah. So this is what led to end up calling it.
Thank you, Kim.
Trauma.
Yeah.
I consulted with colleagues, what should we call it? What should we call it? And we had a number of different choices of names I had come up with, but we ended up with religious trauma syndrome because the trauma is real and needs to be identified as trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so that needed to be in the name. And I called it a syndrome because a syndrome, by definition, is simply a collection of symptoms that are exhibited by a particular group of people.
Okay.
People have been have argued about my using the word syndrome, saying I shouldn't pathologize it. But we're not pathologizing people. I tell clients over and over, you have done nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And like other trauma, the response that you've had, the feelings, the behaviors, the problematic areas of functioning in society that have resulted from it are a natural outcome of what you've been through. And you did not create that.
Yeah. So, well, I think the reason that people were saying you were courageous for doing that is because you're kind of, the sacred cow, you're going after religion, and you can't say anything bad about religion or God, because then you're just evil and wicked. And so when you start calling it out for what it is, people get nervous. And so I think that's where people were saying you were courageous to identify these things out loud.
Right. And I had a friend tell me I was going to lose my practice. If I
really
myself an atheist, I would lose my practice. Actually, the opposite happened, because there are lots of people out there who need someone who's not religious to be a help.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you again, Janice, for calling in. Go ahead.
I just want to let everyone know, I want to encourage people to go to Dr. Winell's website, journeyfree.org, and really consider becoming a member, because access to a phenomenal support group through her and through her organization and her website. And that support group has been so helpful for me and for many other people. So I just really want to let people know that resource is out there. And thanks again for letting me come on the show. This was just marvelous.
You bet, Janice. Thanks for calling.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be praying for your conference.
That's super.
Okay, bye-bye. So, I was going to mention your workshops. Marlene, tell us, Derek Cruz, thank you for your super chat, $2 for your support. What is it that your Journey Free workshops, tell us what they're like and what people could expect from that.
Well, you might be referring to the retreats. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's, I guess, what I meant to say.
We haven't done them since the pandemic. We used to get together. I had retreats that would be 3-day weekends, where people would come from all over, even overseas, and we'd spend that whole time doing recovery exercises and providing huge amounts of support for each other. And they were pretty exciting, pretty life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
I've done about 18 of them, and each one is very intense. Since the pandemic, we've concentrated on services like individual counseling. This group, the support group meets twice a month on conference calls, and also has a private website where people have a forum and can talk to each other. So there's the group, and then we also have support group and training for therapists and coaches.
Well, I think that's what Janice was referring to then. Yeah. So people can get involved in those by going to the website journeyfree.org, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Vast resources there. So I told you I was going to do this, Marlene. So I want to read an excerpt from my book, because I'm all about my book lately. And I'm going to send you a copy. But you were very instrumental, and you didn't know it, in my deconstruction over about 10 or 12 years ago. And I started searching for resources to help me understand what I was going through as I was losing my faith. And as you mentioned in your journey, it was about the Bible, and you started seeing that the Bible was problematic, learning about its construction and history. And I did the same thing because we had similar paths. For me, my faith hinged upon the infallibility of the Bible. It was God's word to me. And so when I began to discover that the Bible was problematic, I really began to see that I was losing I was becoming unmoored in my faith, and it was drifting away from me. And I was traumatized by that because it was everything to me for the better part of my adult life. You got out early. I was much less bright. I was stupid. But I came across an article. And the context of this that I'm going to read is after I had come to the conclusion I no longer believed, I felt an obligation to let my friends know. And I'd already told my kids and a few people in person, but I constructed this letter that I sent out to probably 2 or 3 dozen people that I'd been their pastor. I'd been, we'd walked in our faith together for many years. And so in the course of writing this letter to them, I included a part of your article. And so I'll read that. And so I said, as I wrote the letter, I said, from a recent article I read, a common personality type is a person who is deeply emotional and thoughtful and who tends to throw themselves wholeheartedly into their endeavors. True believers who then lose their faith feel more anger and depression and grief than those who simply went to church on Sunday. And I told them in the letter, that describes me, I think. It's a quote from an interview with psychologist Marlene Winell, who lists it as a symptom of what she calls religious trauma syndrome. In the interview, the questioner asked, aren't these just people who would be depressed, anxious, or obsessive anyways? Marlene says, not at all. In my observation, if my observation is correct, these are people who are intense and involved and caring. They hang on to the religion longer than those who simply walk away because they try to make it work even when they have doubts. Sometimes this is out of fear, but often it is out of devotion. These are people for whom ethics, integrity, and compassion matter a great deal. I find that when they get better and rebuild their lives, they are wonderfully creative and energetic about new things. You remember that?
Yeah.
That, when I read that, I thought, oh my God, that's me.
Yeah.
That's exactly, you were identifying me to a T.
Yeah. That's why you stayed so long. It's because you were devoted.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And there's no shame in that.
No, I know. I realize that when I say I was stupid, I know better than that. I know I was really doing the best I could and trying to make sense of things that weren't making sense and doubling down and digging deeper and all those things that we do. But reading that and other things that I came across really helped me identify what was happening to me. And I say it that way because it was something that was involuntarily happening to me. It wasn't something I was seeking out.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. Thank you for those words. I find myself emotional thinking about it now.
Yeah.
You've helped. Go ahead.
That was a virtual hug.
You've helped so many people by giving a name to this thing and legitimizing it and validating it. It's so important. When did you, what was the year when you coined the term religious trauma syndrome? When was that?
2011. It was in a series of articles in the British journal, Cognitive Therapy Today. Yeah. I've also used the word that I think I've coined, reclaimers. Reclaimers are people like you, who are great, who have reclaimed their lives.
Yeah.
It's like you've been living under this system and pretty bound up by all the beliefs and practices of the religion. and lost track of who you are, your identity, your real identity, and your real life. And so to break out of that and reclaim your life puts you. See, I don't like survivors or even deconstructionists. It's you're reclaiming. It's a positive thing, and you find out with great relief that there's another whole world out here.
Yeah, that's good.
And that life is for living. Like you say.
That's it. Live your best moments.
Yeah.
Genevieve, I mean, I know you came into this conversation as an atheist. Was it shocking to you to realize that there was genuine trauma around the idea of religion?
No, I wouldn't say that I was shocked. I think when I realized exactly what Christianity really entailed, that itself was shocking. Because, for all I knew, it's just, oh, these are people who love Jesus and believe that there's God out there, And that's kind of where my knowledge stopped. It was only, later on that I realized, oh, there's all of these different rules and this patriarchy, and oh my gosh, what does this verse say? And oh my gosh, you believe this. And as soon as I realized that there were people who actively believed that, it was sort of apparent that there would be people who would be suffering as a result, because I don't have experience as a Christian, but I do have experience with domestic violence, and the God of the Bible sounds exactly like one of those abusers. I can't imagine just, I think back to a guest that we had on a little while ago who had said, he's a horrible sinner who deserves hell, but it's okay because he's got Jesus. And gosh, it just breaks my heart. And I got involved in the deconstruction community fairly early on, into diving into this, and I always sort of asked for permission to sort of occupy these spaces. I would say, hey, I am not going through this myself, but I'm here in good faith because I think that a perspective that I can offer is one of somebody who's never believed any of this.
Right.
I don't mourn the loss of an eternal life after death because I've never believed in it, and I've always sort of been fine. And that was actually, I think, within that first month of diving into this and helping people with religious trauma was where I heard your name, Dr. Winell. And that's because, even 30 years later to this day, every time I see somebody ask for resources to help them with this journey, number one is always leaving the fold. And so I guess that leads me to this question. Did you realize when you were writing this book and when you were going through this, that 30 years later, there would be this entire movement of people who are still talking and singing your praises of how much you've helped them?
No, not at all. Not at all. Like I said, it took 4 years, and my main goal was just to finish it.
Anybody who's written a book will totally relate to that, because it's a daunting project, to be sure.
Yeah. And it also struck me as really odd the way that more people didn't sort of jump on the bandwagon and write books that were like it. Like other things that we've had, like eating disorders. Somebody, you name those, and then pretty soon there's a whole lot of books on that, or relationships, and then there are a lot of self-help books on that, or codependency, and how people will like join the latest topic, and it didn't happen with this. And I would talk to therapists, and it turned out like this whole thing about religion being sacred, and even professionals being afraid to touch it.
Yeah.
Was the strangest thing.
Yeah, I think there is that fear of touching the sacred cow and offending people. I think that is fading away. I know Daryl wrote his book, The God Virus, as another psychologist who is delving into the psychology behind religion. His was not as much a personal testimony as yours, but he was dealing with the psychology behind why people believe what they believe and how it damages them.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Other people are afraid to touch it. There's been plenty of deconversion memoirs like mine.
Yeah, memoirs.
But not with the wealth of knowledge that you bring to it as a psychologist. But yeah, I think there is an overall fear of offending people with their precious faith, and we need we need to be criticizing ideas, not people. And I sometimes think we have trouble differentiating that. I'm not putting any person down, but I will put ideas down all day long. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Ideas can be ridiculed, not people. So,
and the ideas can be subtle. Like recently, I wrote an article, more recently anyway, called "It's Not Just Personal: The Collective Trauma of Religion," in which I talk about how religion affects everybody in some negative ways.
Right.
And one of the main issues is agency. Are we powerful enough to create some of our own destiny? And the assumption in Christianity is no, you are a powerless, weak, evil person that needs God's guidance. People are taught to look for God's will in their life, but also in society and so forth. And nobody is empowered, right? So what if we turn that upside down, and think about empowering people to feel like, yes, they can be change agents. Yes, they can do things in their own lives and in society, including things like climate change, for example, or war and peace, or, any of these big, huge issues in which most people feel powerless, right? Don't we have this feeling of power? I'm especially concerned about climate change. And it seems to me all the religious communities have all just thrown up their hands and say, well, it's in God's hands and God can change the climate. So we're being presumptuous to think we can do anything. But culturally is what I'm saying. There's still broadly, even among people that are not Christian, there still is this lack of agency. And I think it comes from our religious past.
Yeah, I do too. And we're slowly moving in the right direction as a culture, although the loud minority who gets all the press would have us believe otherwise. The sheer numbers are moving toward the direction of a non-religious society. Not fast enough, in my opinion, but still moving the right direction. It's like an iceberg. It moves very slowly. In your work with religious trauma, Marlene, what would you say are the key points or the ideas that you feel that the dogmas or the theologies within fundamentalism, and I guess speaking primarily of fundamentalist Christianity, because that's the water we swim in here in America. I know Muslims have their own brand of fundamentalism, and other religions do too. But as American Christians, so to speak, and what are the big ones that you find do the most damage? The ideas that you have found cause the most trauma in people that you've worked with?
Well, the two main ones would be the ones that I mentioned already. I'm not okay. You're not okay, and you're not safe. But there are plenty. There's the notion of only being on Earth temporarily. This is just a blink of an eye in time, and you're only just stopping here as a test, and you're concerned about the hereafter. So then you don't have the investment in your life, in the world, in the community. Everything is individualized. Everybody's supposed to get their private little ticket to heaven and care less about millions of other people. So you're not present. You're not present in
right.
or in your life. There's a negative attitude towards pleasure because of that. Pleasure, not just sex, but just enjoying your life in general. Of course, in this country, we're a lot of workaholics, so people elevate work to a really high level. But the notion of pleasure, which I think is going to get dealt with in that conference that Janice mentioned. Let's see, what else?
That one that you mentioned, that I want to touch back on that one, the idea of this being temporary. I never really connected that to causing trauma, but I can see what you're saying now, because I've talked about that a lot in my Dying Out Loud work, that this life is the one life we know we have, and we're here to make the most of the moments that we have. So break that down a little more. How does that is in and of itself cause trauma to someone living in this world? The idea of it only being temporary.
Okay, well, I'm using the word trauma as the simple definition of trauma is injury.
Injury, okay.
And it can be a small injury, it can be a large injury, but it's an injury to your life if you don't know how. And it's a sin to invest in your life. Now, when people talk about how do you find meaning in life if you don't have God anymore, if you don't have religion,
Mm-hmm.
well, it's by investing in things that bring you joy. You know, it's a mosaic. It's not any one thing. There is no one big purpose. But if you invest in relationships, invest in gardening, invest in art, invest in learning, invest in music, you know, and you put time and energy into these things that you have found bring joy to your life, then you will find those things meaningful. The word full instead of meaning. So that combination brings your life to life, you know, because of all these things that do bring you joy that you're allowed to invest in. In the Christian view, I remember this craziness where we were taught if you love anything more than God, then you're sinning.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And they said from the pulpit things like, if you love tennis more than God, then you're sinning. Well, what does that do to a person? Doesn't that rob the person of all sorts of joyful things and make them think that everything is just kind of dead? And so you live a subdued, deadened sort of existence because of it.
Yeah. Pleasure is evil. And you know, this, when people say things like, I don't like religion, I just like Jesus. Well, they forget that Jesus himself said, according to the Bible, that if you love your father and mother more than me, you're not worthy of me. What kind of a message is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I remember listening to a podcast that was by a husband and wife duo who had deconstructed together, and they were talking about how, you know, they used to love snowboarding, but they had to stop because they realized they loved it too much. They loved drumming, but you know, when they got too into it, they had to put it away, and so there's just sort of this trail of lost dreams that, you know, ended up being for naught anyway because they decided Jesus doesn't exist. And
And there's, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it's sad because it kind of goes, not that in particular, but going back to this idea of creating your own meaning in life by finding joy. I think that's something that's especially difficult for people who've deconstructed to really wrap their minds around because, just like you said, it all comes down to this lack of agency. You know, meaning isn't something you create. That's something that you're given. God tells you what your meaning is.
Yeah. And in the church context, you're taught to look for God's will in your life. Like God has a perfect plan for your life and everybody else's, and you're supposed to be obsessed with finding God's will all the time. And you know, people would take it to such extremes, you know, like asking God what to wear in the morning. But certainly when it came to things like relationships, who to marry, career, a lot of agony over trying to figure out what God wanted you to do for a career, instead of paying attention to what makes you, what you love, what you can spend your time doing that would bring you joy and make that your career. No guidance in that frame. So people talk about, oh, I became a missionary, kicking and screaming against God's will, but I became a always this story about how they opposed God's will, but then God taught them to accept it and do well, and blah, blah, blah. And there's no notion of following your bliss.
Yeah.
Right.
And I see a very popular sort of Christian meme go around. It's something that I've seen some fundamentalist friends share about how, you know, you're not a Christian because it's easy. It's not always easy. It's not always hard. You're not here to be happy. You know, you're here to follow the Lord.
Exactly.
And that is also just similarly shocking from my perspective, from an entirely secular background, and also just, you know, that's,
well, the whole message, I recall a primary message within fundamentalism is to deny yourself
Mm-hmm.
Take up your cross and follow me. So there's always this cross to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow God finds pleasure in that. And if you're finding pleasure in anything, there's the fear of it becoming an idol. And you shall have no other gods before me. There's this jealous, petty God that's behind the curtain all the time that is evoking fear in us that we're doing something wrong all the time. Well, that's just a very damaging notion to carry around, especially in a child or a young person who hasn't learned critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's another one of them. You're not supposed to think.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to think for yourself. You're not supposed to follow critical thinking, logical paths. You're not supposed to learn how to do that. So if you are robbed of this basic skill of figuring things out, then you're robbed of the method by which you might find your way out.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So as you're helping people reclaim, I love that term, by the way. That's a very positive, forward-moving idea. What are the tools that you give folks to help them reclaim their lives? You're going to give away all your secrets on this show for free right here. Thank you, Aunt Kathy. After 50 years of dedication, I'm thrilled to explore life, and Dr. Winell's book has helped me enjoy freedom. Look at that.
Okay. Well, working with somebody starts off with forming a relationship, to know that I am not going to preach at them or be like a lot of other people in their life that has had all the answers and will tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But to have faith in their processes and support their growth and be empowering. Okay. And that's sometimes a new experience for someone. And then as far as what we do, it's really holistic. It's a combination of intellectual processes, emotional things, social, because, for example, you lose your support network. So it's important to look at that. And, how are you going to find a new context, a new community, new friends, because we don't live alone. And also physical, because the trauma response is a physiological one.
Mm-hmm.
So things that we at Journey Free, we all do a certain amount of psychoeducation because people don't necessarily understand the connection between their bodily responses and their emotions, right?
Yeah.
And people talk about being triggered,
mm-hmm.
having emotional flashbacks. To understand that and to know how to respond to what your body's doing, which is usually getting all geared up and with anxiety, heavy breathing and tension and so forth, when something reminds you of something that you were taught. I had a client who burned his finger getting a pizza out of the oven, and it sent him into this whole realm of fear because it was the kind of heat that he was told hell would be like. Like a grown adult,
That's yeah.
So that's called a trauma response, and that's
right.
That's because your brain is storing all this information from time.
Oh no!
Oh, we lost Dr.
We
Winell.
lost her.
Just when she was getting
right when she was going to share the secrets of how to recover.
The secrets of the universe. Oh no!
Kidding. I was actually having a long conversation with my sister today, and we were talking about therapy and coaching and all of these different things, and how some people don't understand that it's not a simple fix. It's not something that you fix by you don't take a pill and suddenly you're better. You go to a therapist or a psychologist because you need somebody to work through your specific problems with, and it is hard work.
And it needs the thing that when I was a pastor, I did a lot. There she is back.
Yay.
Oh, we thought we'd lost you for good. I don't know, but you're back. So you were just about to give us the secrets, and I thought, oh, she's cut it off.
Yeah, this is going to cost. No,
yeah,
just kidding.
Behind the paywall here now.
So, well, one of the things that has happened since I wrote the book, actually, the last couple of decades, is a lot of research on trauma.
Yeah,
and therapists learning to be trauma informed. And so if we include mental and emotional trauma, like being given these very, very powerful ideas that will fuck you up, then that can be considered trauma, and reactions later, like the man I was talking about, can be considered a trauma reaction just to simply an idea. So people need to understand what the trauma response is and how to intervene with it. So that's a big thing that I work with people on. And then a lot of it then is about empowering and helping people accept that it's okay to think for yourself. Your feelings are okay. I talk about all the different feelings in my book. And also the rebuilding is something that you can do. You basically have to face up to the existential questions and issues that the rest of us have to face up to.
Yeah.
You know?
There's no simple black and white answers that religion gives us.
And I tell people, welcome to the human race. We have to deal with relationships. We have to deal with meaning in life. We have to deal with worrying about mortality. You have to make peace with mortality. That's a big one, because they've thought they're going to live forever.
Yeah, that's the thing I deal with a lot. And there is so much fear of death and anxiety around death in Christians. And it's baffling to me. It shouldn't be, but it is, that they're the ones who are supposed to just be, it's just a comma for them, and they're skipping off into eternal life. But they really, at the core, maybe don't believe that so much.
Right.
There's something missing there.
Yeah. Did you know there's actually some empirical work on people that are on life support systems in hospitals? The statistic of people that want the life support systems to stay on longer are the more religious people.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? What's your professional opinion?
Because they are very afraid of death. That's why the religion is so important to them.
Yeah. The people that have been the most, even when I got my diagnosis 3 years ago, I've got a lot of very religious family members and still some friends. And the people that had the hardest time coming to terms with the reality that I'd been given a death sentence were the Christians. The atheists in my life ran toward it. They embraced it, they accepted it, and they said, "We're here. What can I do? What do you need?" Right. The Christians didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, because people that are secular are more comfortable and more experienced with human relationships, these horizontal relationships with people in your life. Whereas Christians do this vertical thing, where sometimes they only have an intimate relationship with God, and that's it.
Yeah, they don't know how to interact in the real world.
So there isn't the compassion. There's a huge amount of judgment for everybody. There's a lack of compassion.
Well, it's what I'm doing a talk in a lot of places this year called "Putting Away Childish Things," and from as a Christian, what that scripture is in 1 Corinthians. When I was a man, when I was a child, I felt like a child, understood like a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things, and that's the title of my book, Childish Things. But the premise behind this talk is that Christian thinking, evangelical thinking, is very binary, black and white, good and evil. And as you said, when you're helping people reclaim their humanity, they're having to come to terms with a very gray and nuanced world without simple answers. And that's difficult at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very difficult. I was recently thinking about when somebody told me that, there is no morality without God. I realized that the Bible doesn't have an answer to the trolley problem. It's not a very good it's not a very good basis for us to make these moral decisions, because that's just not how the world works.
No. It's not black and white.
No.
And so, when you're helping people reclaim that basic element of life, that's a challenge, and I think it can be daunting for them to come to terms with that, is what you've probably found, right?
Yeah. Decision making is a big issue. Because you have to think about it yourself and accept the responsibility yourself. That we all have to learn.
It's much easier to have a sky daddy who gives us all the answers.
Yeah, except that it's even from within the system, it's sometimes nerve-wracking trying to figure out what the sky daddy wants.
Well, and that's another thing I've talked about a lot is that people ask me how difficult is it dealing with your diagnosis, and I say, well, no. The question was, what if you'd gotten this diagnosis as a Christian? And the reality is, as a Christian who believes that God is involved in our lives, you have to factor God into everything. So why did God allow this? What's God going to do about it? What did I do wrong? Did I deserve this? So on and so forth. Life is so much simpler without a God involved in it. It just is. Stuff happens. There's no reason. It's chaotic. It's random, and you can't try to make patterns out of it because there are no patterns.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, is that what you would say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So anyway.
So, and the skills that you learn, like acceptance of life and the certain amount of chaos and unpredictability is all just part of the process.
Yeah. My friend Cass has a term he coined to say yes to what is. Just accept it as it is, and life is so much simpler and not as stressful, if you will. So what is next for Dr. Marlene Winell? What's your future near term and long term look like? You're not even close to retiring, it sounds like. You're busy as ever.
Well, I've been trying. I have I'm turning 70 next month.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I am trying to cut back. I'm focusing more on training and writing. I have this support group for professionals, and I'm really enjoying that, and it's really exciting to be helping people. In other words, disseminate the processes that you were alluding to a minute ago about how do you help people with this. That's not in the book. That's like 30 years worth of learning about what do you do with people who are going through this. Okay. So writing more about that and helping people with that.
Do you have another book in you?
Pardon me?
Do you have another book in you?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out, honestly, because I know how much work it is, and I'm not sure.
You want to tackle that?
For my 70th birthday, I'm going to jump out of an airplane.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did that.
With a parachute, I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I did that. Bevan and I did that a couple years ago. It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I've wanted to do that for a long time.
Well, that's fun.
Things like that. But I think that I'll come out with a new edition of the book with some additional chapters.
That's good.
And include the trauma material.
Yeah. Awesome. I think you should. Well, are you going to start? Are you anticipating starting back up with your in-person workshops?
I don't know. A lot of people are asking for that. We've also got an online version, but it's not the same.
No, I like in person. I'm touchy-feely. I like getting in.
Yeah.
I like getting with a human being in the same room, and so if you do that, I may have to join one of them and just have a weekend with you. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. We do fun things on those weekends too. Like we had one in San Francisco where one night we all dressed up and went to a drag show.
I love it.
Wild, totally wild. Another time we had a person come in and do wine tasting with us.
Oh yeah.
The pleasures of, the idea of pleasure. So.
Well, if you start them back up, let me know. I will see about becoming a part of that. I think it'd be fun. Okay. Will do. Any parting words? We've put in your in the chat, we've put your link to your website. The book is still available on Amazon. I've seen people can get your. There's also a workbook that goes with the book that you can download for free from the website. If you go to where the book is, the icon right there, it'll say download the workbook, and you can do that for free. And cool. It lays out all the exercises for you, so you can work your way through and accomplish a lot on your own.
I love that. That is so great to know.
Genevieve, any last questions for our guest tonight?
I wouldn't say a question. I have so much appreciation for what you have done for the world. I know you sort of balked at it being courageous, but Christianity in particular has this very protected role in our society where you're deemed a better person for having these beliefs that are so traumatizing to so many, to all of us. So I will say that I think you're incredibly courageous, and your contributions cannot be understated. You've helped
Thank you.
every person that I've talked to, I think, has been helped by you in one way or another, which is a far reach for somebody who does not meet all these people in person.
Yeah, I had no idea that when you published it goes so far. It's really kind of amazing.
Well,
so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the system that allows it to get disseminated. It's good.
Yeah. Well said, Genevieve. Zap, thank you for your super chat. He says, love you, Dave, Genevieve, and Dr. Marlene.
Thanks.
And I echo what Genevieve said. Marlene, you're just kind of a hero to me. Thank you, Anton from Mexico. 99 pesos. That's cool. People all over the world are watching us, Marlene.
Well, thank you for your work too. I've enjoyed listening to your talks online.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad we finally connected. And you again, I can't thank you enough for the work you've done. It personally affected me at a time when I really needed it. And I know it has countless others, as Genevieve said. And you're a hero. And I just am kind of in awe of the way that you pioneered this work, and it's become, like I said earlier, so commonplace now. But when you were beginning to uncover things and give names to things, it wasn't common. And so your work will go on. And just, it's an honor to know you. I just want to say that.
Thank you. That's so sweet. And I'm very pleased to get to know you too.
Well, that would be, we'll end there, and we'll be in touch, Marlene, at different times. Good luck with the conference and everything coming up. All the best to you. Stay healthy. We need you around longer. Don't do your best. That's what I'm doing too. But
until you know better, and then you do better, right?
That's what I say. Love you so much, Genevieve. Good to see you again, darling.
Good to see you again too. We will miss you next week, I believe. Yeah.
Me? Oh yes, I'm going to be off next week.
Yes.
Got a great guest coming on. I'm going to be taking a week off. Bevan and I are taking a well-earned vacation and some downtime. I'm going to completely unplug from everything electronic and just look at water, because that's my therapy.
Yes.
Good.
So thanks, everyone. Another good show tonight. Marlene, again, thank you for coming on. We were so privileged to have you as our guest.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that's our show for tonight.
Okay.